I'm excited to welcome author Brian Cuban, the brother of Mark Cuban. Brian, thanks for stopping by, man. And you're talking about, before we get into questions that Greg has for you, how being an author is a full-time job, and the fact that you have to do a lot of the marketing yourself. You have to be really willing to reach out because there's so much work involved in just posting on social media and sending an email out to a couple people, right?
Sure. Well, marketing is a full-time job for sure. And I've learned a lot of lessons, and especially if you don't have that, like I said, if you're not Gary Vee or someone and you don't have that massive audience, you're literally selling, in the million person email list, you're literally selling one book at a time. So you have to start 7, 8, 9 months in advance and start your marketing. And a lot of authors don't do that. So they all of a sudden, they're 2 months before, they post it on Facebook, they post it here or there, and they just don't get the sales they want because they didn't do the work. And a lot of them, they're not willing to do the work because you have to set shame aside and be willing to take no, and be willing to take, why are you sending me this? Don't send me this again. And just let it roll off you to build that opt-in list of people who are opting in specifically for your book, right? And
Totally.
I've started early. That's what we were saying. I started early because I have 10,000 LinkedIn connections. I am messaging every single one of those with a synopsis of my book. I'd like you to opt in because you don't want to spam people. So you have, this is our opt-in reach out, and a lot of them do. And so I do that on Facebook too, where you're going to get a higher percentage of opt-ins because you have a more intimate relationship. You tend to have a more intimate relationship, online intimate relationship with your Facebook connections. The problem with Facebook is they throttle you. So you have to start early because you send 100 and they'll shut you down for 3 days.
Right. The rule is, and I've shown where you don't even show a link after you send 50. Here's a tip for you, and we'll get right to Greg's first question, is you basically go ahead, you shoot no link, then you go into links after that because they can let you send as many messages. But when you send some sort of link, they nail you.
Yeah, and
So
I don't send links. For this time around, I avoided that. I used links from my last book, and it was a pain. I avoided that. I just send a message with a synopsis, and I just asked them to opt in, right? So I'm not asking them to buy anything.
I
And
got it.
so what I've done is now when the book comes out or when it goes into pre-order, rather than going to each person, I have everyone in one place because I have an opt-in email list.
Yeah, that
You're
makes
getting
sense,
an
Brian. So, Brian, hey, you're a hard-hitting, scrappy entrepreneur, I can tell. Were you born with that? Did you develop that? How did you get
I
there?
learned a lot of lessons from my brother Mark. I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. I hate no. I'm not a phone guy. Where you got to get on the phone and cold call. Although I guess these emails are kind of like cold calling, but no, I've never been that way. I mean, I've always been a lawyer, and now I'm a writer. So I hate that stuff. I was not born with the entrepreneur gene like Mark was.
I didn't have the benefit of being able to speak with you prior, as Neil has. I would love to hear your story. And I know people listening right now to this live stream or watching it would love to hear it too. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, as many people know, I'm in recovery from cocaine and alcohol addiction, as well as eating disorders. I'll have 17 years in long-term recovery on April 8th. I don't know when you're aware of this, but April 8th of 2024,
Huh.
I'll have 17 years. So I'm very excited about that. And, I've, for me, a much different trajectory than either of my brothers. I mean, I've been to a psychiatric hospital twice. I came close to suicide in 2005. I have 3 failed marriages, all result from drugs and alcohol. One more, I get a free set of steak knives. So I've been arrested. My trajectory, is much different. Nothing you would really associate with success, right? When we talk about success. But for me, everything began back in childhood. You talk about childhood trauma and the body keeps the score. I was a overweight kid, trending towards obese, again, the middle of 3 boys. And Mark was the firstborn, and he, as you might expect, was outgoing, as the firstborns are tend to be those types. selling this door to door, selling that door to door. I remember our local newspapers, there was a printer strike, so both the Pittsburgh Press and the Post-Gazette shut down. He and his buddies drove out to Cleveland, barely old enough to drive, and bought the Cleveland Plain Dealer and bought a bunch of them and drove them back to Pittsburgh and sold them on the street corner in downtown Pittsburgh for twice what they paid. So you kind of knew what he was going to be, right? And he became that and a little bit more. My younger brother, Jeff, was a nationally ranked wrestler, a jock, beer parties, very good looking kid, dates and all the girls, all the things that I associated with love and acceptance, right? That I wanted. I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy, I was withdrawn, and I internalized anything negative said about me and to me and wore it as who I was, as like a skin tight suit. And I also had a difficult relationship with my mom. And I'll tell you a little bit about this, but I want to make it clear to all of your watchers and listeners that I don't blame my mother for anything I went through. There's a difference between cause and correlation. People can go through difficult things and turn out great, nothing will happen, and other people will go through the exact same things, and you'll have mental health issues later in life. That's why it's correlation and not cause. So there was a lot of fat shaming in my house. As I said earlier, I was a heavy kid. My mom I used to come home from school in a suburb of Pittsburgh, Mount Lebanon, and I would go into the cabinet and I would pull out the can of Chef Boyardee ravioli or beefaroni or SpaghettiOs. Do they still have that? And I would pull those out and I would take that manual can opener and I'd stick the spoon in and eat it. And my mom would just be gobbling it down. And my mom would come in from selling real estate and she would sometimes walk into the kitchen, not all the time, but it happened enough that I remember it vividly. And she would say, Brian, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig. Now, these were the things my mother's mother said to her. These were the things I'm sure my grandmother said to my great-grandmother said to my grandmother in some fashion. Fat shaming as families is often passed down generationally. I'm Jewish, come from an Eastern European Jewish family. My grandmother was from Lithuania, very stereotypical Jewish grandmother focused around food, eat. And unfortunately, she also had a very verbally and mentally abusive relationship with my mother. My grandmother was, according to my mom, a diagnosed schizophrenic. And so they just, my mother grew up to hate my grandmother and was always a back and forth. And my mother developed her own mental health issues at a time when, in the 70s, when women, couldn't talk about things. There's a stigma today still, but back then, I mean, you couldn't say a word if you were a woman, if you were a mother, you could risk losing your children. So it was kind of just under the current and hush hush, like it was contagious and spoken about, but not understanding these things, right? Hearing these things from my mom, I grew depressed. And my mother loved me dearly. She loved me dearly. She loved all of us. And people ask me, well, what about Mark and Jeff? You'd have to ask them. I don't know how they experience these things. I don't speak for them. I don't speak for my brothers. I only speak for how I experienced it. And so I grew, even more depressed. I began to eat more Chef Boyardee, and I grew to be a bigger Brian and got heavier and heavier. And it so often happens as when kids change for what other kids perceive in the negative at school, the bullying started. It happened then and it happens now, although it happens now in a much more insidious way, right? Because you can get bullied over Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever by millions of people you don't know. Back then it was brick and mortar. You knew who was doing it to you. It was right in your face. Going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew about it. And so it was a much different time, but you're a product of your times. It didn't hurt any less as you experienced it. And, the kids called me a fat pig and you need to go to Sears and get a bra for your man boobs. And I became the sad clown, really, because I didn't want the kids to know how much it hurt me. And I became very self-deprecating. And let me shut off my phone. I don't know why that's.
We don't hear that one, so don't worry about that.
There. And I'm going to throw my watch over here. So I hung around the popular kids. And in my mind, these kids who were doing the bullying were the popular kids, right? I didn't have Instagram. The popular kids were the kids I saw every day. The kids who were going to the after school football game, the kids who were going to the concerts together or going to McDonald's and, going to the house parties, the things that I wanted so badly to be invited to, but thought I was too, ugly to ever be included and too much of a reject to ever be included. But I hung around them like on the outside. All of the bullying culminated in what I call the day of the gold pants. Have either of you seen Saturday Night Fever?
Oh yeah.
So you have
Yes.
John Travolta, remember, in his skin tight white pants. Well, Mark taught disco, believe it or not. This was 1976, back in when disco was just getting going, and Saturday Night Fever had just hit, and the soundtrack was, going platinum. And Mark was coming home all the time in these bell-bottom pants, flowers and platform shoes. And one day he gave me a pair of his pants, his disco pants, and they were these shiny gold satin bell-bottom disco pants. He came into my room and he asked me if I wanted them. I said, sure. I mean, I love my brother, and he gave me these pants. But Mark wasn't a big guy. The pants fit him fine. I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats trying to get out, but I didn't care. I wore those pants to school, and the kids made fun of them, and my stomach was hanging out. And I'm walking home from school one day with these kids. Again, it was the group of kids who were the bullies, but the popular kids. And so I hung around them, and they're in their little group, and we're walking on a sidewalk. It's a mile walk from the school to my house along this busy street. And I'm wearing my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants. And they start making fun of them. And I'm laughing it off. Yeah, I know. You need to take out a belt loop, Cuban. Yeah, I'm going to do it when I get home. All that kind of stuff. And one of the kids pulls at the seam where the zipper is, just pulls at it, reaches out and it rips. And another kid goes, ooh, he pulls and it rips some more. And within seconds, these kids were on me like a pack of wild dogs. They physically assaulted me on that street, on that sidewalk. They ripped off my pair of shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants that my brother Mark had given me. And they threw the pieces, the shreds, into this busy street. Down to my Fruit of the Loom tighty whities, my 3-ring tube socks that you had in the 70s, my Keds tennis shoes, and I had a Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt on. And they walked down the street high-fiving like kids will do, like they had done the funniest thing ever. I wait for traffic to clear, and I go out and pick up the shreds, and I put them over my tighty whities, and I waddle home. And I'll tell you, that mile walk might as well have been from Pittsburgh to California. That's how long it seemed. And the worst part of it, the absolute worst part of that walk of shame, were the stoplights at these busy intersections, because I had to stand there and wait for the light to clear and traffic to stop, and people are looking at me out their window, and their heads go like this, but no one rolled down their window and asked me if I was okay. And I finally got home, and I walked downstairs into our basement. The house was empty. It was funeral quiet. And I remember like it was yesterday, the stairs creaked. We had these blue painted old wooden stairs down into the basement, and it was a pretty steep decline. And the stairs creaked. And with every creak, I felt it was like ripples on a pond, right? Throwing a rock into the pond, where the ripples of the sound went out to my father, who ran an auto trim shop about 5 miles away, where he said, you're worthless, you son. And he wouldn't have done that. And rippled out to my mother, who'd say, I told you so. And, and she wouldn't have done that. She loved me dearly. Rippled out to my brothers, who would say, dude, you can't stand up to bullies. You're not one of us. And of course, they wouldn't have done that. They would have gone and kicked their asses. And I found a garbage can in that basement on that cement floor. And I pulled out the newspapers and the Chef Boyardee cans and all the other stuff. And I put the shreds of these shiny gold pants down at the bottom and covered them up, thinking, okay, that is going to hide my shame. I'll never think about this again. But that's not how trauma works. Trauma threads, trauma remembers, and trauma has a way of coming out for people when you least expect it, in a time of your life when you least expect it, and when you're married, when you're in law school, whatever, and it just, and because it's always under the surface when you don't deal with it. And
Now-
then boom.
Yeah. Now, Brian, why is it that we do not think mental abuse versus physical abuse for children is wrong. Why do we not look at specifically anything that's verbal abuse as strong as physical abuse? And
Because it was
that
1976. We were, I
but
mean,
I still don't think it's happened today. I don't think it's been fixed
uh,
yet.
because I'm in that bubble, I see more outreach and more awareness. But you're right, and it's going to depend on it can depend on so many things, guys. It can depend on culture. You can be in a culture where it's accepted, right? It can depend on a lot of different. You could be, it just you might not be growing up in a way that it is talked about within the family unit. And so, and again, there might be a generational avoidance. There are so many factors that come into play that are so varied that it's hard to just generalize. But overall, I can say that I believe just societally, in a societal way, there is more awareness.
There's more, but not enough.
Not enough. That verbal abuse can cause many, many issues.
Yeah. So Brian, that was a real painful story. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure you've said it many times by now. I was hanging on every word and actually there with you, and it was very upsetting. How has that shaped you in your adulthood, in your career at this point?
It had a massive impact on me because, again, cause and correlation are different. I can't say that was the only thing that had an impact. Obviously, I had trauma at home, verbal trauma at home, and other verbal trauma at school, physical trauma. I was assaulted. So there are many things, genetics, I was socially awkward as it was. Many things come into play, environmental variable and social variables. But it was right around then when that one thing happened that I first remembered looking at my reflection, seeing a reflection that was basically a monster not worthy of love and who would never be loved, never have a girlfriend. I didn't kiss my first girl till I was in law school. And so I can look at that as a snapshot in time. And I believe that everyone is an accumulation of snapshots, right? Started going back to our earliest memories or even before we remember them, of love, of trauma, of pain, of joy, of happiness, and you string those together, to create kind of the framework of who we are that people don't see. They only see what we exhibit outwardly in our Photoshop and Facesmood Instagram photos of our great life, right? They don't see the snapshots underneath. And so that was the first major snapshot that I remember of that sort of began to shape how I saw myself as a human being. And I carried that to Penn State University through, the finish of high school and Penn State University, where it really began to manifest itself. And at Penn State University, it's funny, I remember this one event at Penn State. And my father had just driven me up. It was freshman, it was the first day. All the freshmen were unpacking, and I was living in a dorm with 3 other guys. And my father's helping me unpack, and I'm in the dorm, and I'm staring out this long rectangular window. And it was this cool fall day in Pennsylvania. The leaves are falling off the trees. You could just feel the snap in the air, right? Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, snap in the air of fall. And like you might feel like maybe in Chicago or somewhere else. And I make eye contact with this curly brown-haired girl who's out in the parking lot with the trunk open of her car, and her parents are talking among themselves. She's talking to this girl next to her, and she looks at me, and our eyes meet, and I start sweating. And I imagine my entire life with this girl within a space of 5 seconds. We're going to date, we're going to get married, and we're going to have 2 1/2 children. My life is good now. Everything's good. And I realized in this one sickening moment, I felt it in my stomach. It wasn't a smile, it was a smirk. She turned to her friend just like this. They say something to each other. She turns back to me, puts her hand over her mouth. Ugly, ugly. Now, I'm not the first kid to have a nasty thing said to him, right? It happens all the time. Another kid might have said ugly back. Another kid might have flipped her off, shot her, given her the arm salute. Or we all respond based on how we're socially, genetically, and environmentally programmed. And again, it wasn't her fault either. But I remember that snapshot. And I was somebody who already felt ugly. And you know what my response to that was? Mentally, she's right. She's right. That she is absolutely right. How can I not be ugly? How can I not be ugly? What does a now barely 18-year-old have in his mental health tool chest in 1970, going on 78, going on 1979, back in boomer era? What does that young boy have in his tool chest? What do I have control over? What wrench and screwdriver can fix this?
Totally.
What did I have? My world was out of control. How can I get control?
Wow.
My control was over food. All I had to do, the only thing I had control over was what I put in my mouth, food, eating, right? I eat to live. Well, I associated eating with bullying. So my path to this girl's acceptance, my path to those bullies' acceptance, my path to my mother's love, although she did love me, was to get skinny. And so I began to restrict my food intake. And at 18 years old in 1979, before anybody was talking about it for men or women, I developed an eating disorder. Before even, do you know who Karen Carpenter was?
Yeah.
Singer for the beautiful drummer and singer for the Carpenters, beautiful voice, On Top of the World, and many other great songs. She would pass away from complications related to anorexia nervosa in 1983. This was 4 years before that. And hers would bring it into the pre-digital national spotlight and but also cement the stereotype it as a female disorder. Here, I'm a guy, and all I knew is that I would weigh myself obsessively at the school. And every pound that came off, I thought that was a pound towards acceptance. But here's the problem, guys. With every pound that came off, I still looked in the mirror and saw that fat pig monster.
Oh, man.
Or the classroom mirror, the mall mirror, the car mirror. And so that meant I had to lose more weight and more. But the figure never changed. The delusion, what I saw in my mental delusion never changed. And I eventually transitioned into binging and purging, bulimia. Wow. And every time I binged and purged, I got a feeling of peace, like the next day was going to be okay. But I was engaging in a behavior, again, that I had no name for, I didn't understand, but it gave me this 2 seconds feeling of peace when I engaged in that act. But when the peace went away, in swept the shame of engaging in this weird thing that people just don't do, right? You don't go to the bathroom, the community bathroom, and flush the toilet and throw up so people can't hear it after you binged a meal. And it was shameful. It was shameful because I instinctively knew guys just couldn't do that. But I had to because every time I did it, I felt like the next day everything would be okay. Right. And then came the drinking. I started drinking because it wasn't making me feel any better. So I started drinking to so I didn't have to feel it all. And by the time I was 21, going into my sophomore year at Penn State, or into my junior year, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I was drinking every night. I was going to the bars by myself on campus. I turned 21 and I was old enough to drink. So I would go to we have state, the government control, they still control the alcohol in Pennsylvania, right? You have to go what's called a state store. And I would go to the state store and I would buy these little bottles of tequila, and I would go out into the main street and to the alley where all the bars are at Penn State and University Park, and I would swig the tequila so I could get drunk in the hope it would change me into someone different and meet girls and things. But it didn't. It only made me feel worse. And I would go into the bar and get drunker, and I would end up just miserable. And there was this vicious cycle. The closest I ever came at Penn State to any epiphany that I had a problem was walking into a hamburger joint, drunk, of course. And I came across this rack of pamphlets that the 12-step groups put out. And for those who don't know 12-step, for the most well-known one for alcohol is AA, but there are others. There's 12-step for for drugs and all kinds. There's even 12 steps for eating disorders and all other groups. But it was a rack of pamphlets called the 20 Questions. And it was geared towards college students. Do you black out? Do you miss class? And I'm checking off yes to all these questions. And they give you a number to call. And all I did was I crinkled it up. I threw it in the trash basket, thinking I'm a college student. We all do this. That's as close as I ever came. Closest I ever came.
Oh my goodness.
And that was the trajectory into my young adulthood into alcoholism.
Wow. Brian, let's quickly talk about your first crime novel and then the second, and then Greg has his final question.
Okay, yeah, we ran out of time, but that also led to cocaine addiction and 2 trips to a psychiatric hospital, a near suicide attempt, and all kinds of problems. But yeah, let's go.
All right, so let's talk about latest books. Go ahead with the first one out, and then the second one's coming out.
I've written 4 books actually. My first book was self-published. It was a memoir well ahead of its time called Shattered Image. It was about my struggle with body image, which I am going to rewrite in 2025 for a new audience. The second book I wrote was my more traditional memoir that's more well known, called The Addicted Lawyer: Tales of the Bars, Booze, Blow, and Redemption, which outlines my struggles as a lawyer with drugs and alcohol. And then my first novel was called The Ambulance Chaser, set in Pittsburgh, about a lawyer falsely accused of the murder of a high school classmate 30 years prior. And he goes on the run across the country to try to find the one person who can prove his innocence. In my current novel, my most recent crime thriller that will be released in December of this year is called The Body Brokers, and it centers around the fentanyl overdose crisis. It is the same character from The Ambulance Chaser who goes to pick up his girlfriend for their anniversary and finds her dead of a fentanyl overdose. But he suspects that she is murdered. And he travels into the belly of the beast, travels to Philadelphia, the Kensington area of Philadelphia, to prove she was murdered. And this centers around that.
Thanks for stopping by, Martin.
Thank you.
So talk about your career in acting. Did you always want to be an actor growing up?
Yeah, I think since the 4th grade, I remember doing a play and in the 4th grade, and I just liked acting very much, and went for it, and always did a lot of plays in school. And then I don't think I did much about it till I was, I guess, I got a job once with Sean Connery. Actually, I don't remember the studio. It was Columbia, and I was Sean Connery's stand-in in a movie called The Anderson Tapes. And I remember getting accepted to the 5th year of school, I think at the School of the Arts at NYU, and at the same time being accepted to a classical repertory company in the Village in New York. And I remember going up to him and saying, what would you do? Would you continue school? Or would you just join the repertory? And he said to me, young man, if you can do Antigone, you can do anything. Which means do the Greek classics, you can do anything. So I joined the repertory, left school, and then, just did a lot of plays in New York and Lincoln Center and a few things, and off Broadway, and then went to Hollywood, I guess, in '74.
So, tell me, what's it like, being able to work with your son, Jesse, on some of these projects?
Well, it's a lot of fun. It's very relaxing because we know each other so well, and I can give him little tips here and there. If we get a strong director, I don't have to do anything. If you get someone who's focusing on so many other things at the same time as directors do, I take Jesse aside and I give him a couple of notes. But he's so free with his instrument now that it's very exciting. I years ago I would make suggestions on his auditions, and now I don't have to. He uses his instrument very well, and he's really good in this movie. And the movie we just finished, another Western called The Gunfighter's Deal, and he plays a coward in a Western town, and he makes a deal with the devil to be the fastest gun in the West. And it's a good little script. And then he wants to renege it because killing too many people, and terrific little Western. And he's very good in it. Very good.
So did Jesse always want to be an actor? Did you push him into it? I think this is as a father myself with kids and saying or did he really want to do it?
No, I never. I mean, there's so much emotional stress. You want to push your kid, these stage mothers and stage fathers. I don't know how they can do it. I would never push my kid into this business. It's so full of rejection and emotional stress. And, I think the thing I tell most young actors is if they don't hire you, it's their mistake. And I tell them to watch shows like The Offer, which is all about tenacity and all about Al Ruddy making The Godfather and how many obstacles he had. So, I didn't want him to go into the business, and ultimately he just liked it and did an off-Broadway play when he was 18 and transitioned into just a lovely human being. And he really cares, and he's not tainted by Hollywood. And he's been around movie stars and their children and movie sets for the longest time. And he's still very grounded.
What influences did you have, Martin, as you were learning to act, and maybe even today, actors that you watched growing up, maybe parts that you're playing today that you draw from those performances in the past that you've watched and so on?
Well, I made the mistake of trying to be Steve McQueen for the first 25 years of my career. I mean, I was always trying. I love Steve McQueen. I love Paul Newman, and I think eventually, you just get to that point where you can use your instrument to be Marty Cove. John Kreese is definitely, God knows where the venom comes from for John Kreese in my body, because, I'd rather do vulnerable roles. I'd rather do soft things, and I'm a romantic at heart. So, but there's a lot of stuff that comes up for John Kreese that's easy for me to do. But I'd much rather do, like we did that Hallmark movie a couple of years ago, and it was on 2 weeks ago. And I'm a chef, and he's a romantic character, and he has a restaurant, and his daughter is a chef as well, and it's just marvelous. And we did a scene, and all the crew came up to me after I did a scene about my mother leaving me the restaurant, and they were all in tears. So I kind of love that stuff. I think vulnerability is, more enjoyable to play. Some people like to play the tough guy. I don't.
You talk about your instrument. Seems like you really are a student of the game in acting. If you talk about that, especially with your son, and talking about define instrument for me. And I never heard that as an actor use that language for acting.
I remember studying with a couple of people, John Lenn and Milton Gonzalez, and they would refer to things as your body as an instrument, and learn to cultivate your body and your mind. It's a very spiritualistic attempt to really control why certain situations call for certain thoughts. And I believe in, I started doing my homework at a very late age, where backstories for every character rarely come in to the script. They just don't. A little bit they do, but you've got to fill in between the lines with where this guy was, with his women of his life, his mother, where he was as having an occupation, what are his relationships to his father, to his brothers, it's very interesting to create all that for the characters as a backstory, and then you let it go, and then you just go and do the script, because the script rarely has a lot of information about the background of the people you play. And as a young actor, I was lazy to do that. And I think now I wouldn't think of doing a character, all the characters I guess I did, I did 3 movies during the strike, and they all had waivers. So I was able to get into them, and it was fascinating because you just create a history for these people, and that instrument that I guess that that body that we have formulates itself into that character because you know the past, you know where he's been. It's like asking you, where have you been? Yesterday and the day before. And then if I put you in the same position, you got to go see another doctor, even though you saw 5 doctors yesterday. You know that it's not a pleasant experience, but you're going to have to go because you have a bad knee, and this is a great orthopedic doctor. And you go there, but you have an attitude because the last 2 days you didn't like the doctors who you went to see. So you kind of have a familiarity with certain aspects of emotionality and you just use them. And it's fun. It's a lot more fun to act that way than winging it,
Yeah. Martin, there were a lot of years between like the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, the series, when it came out. Was it exciting to jump back in? And, had you thought about maybe down the road after Karate Kid, all those years, getting into a series again about it? Or,
it was always interesting to see the reaction of the Karate Kid fans. It carried on over 10 years. I mean, and you realize it was such a hit movie.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you do other things and you don't really think about the Karate Kid anymore. That was a tough guy, one-dimensional cartoon character, and you want to do other things. And then I walked into Cagney and Lacey, and they allowed me to go out and do the Karate Kid and go out and do Rambo, and eventually you do Wyatt, or you do some of these movies, but they were all kind of tough guys, So when I signed on for the series, the movie had become such a religious experience to so many people because of bullying, because of a variety of aspects of the writing. So when I signed on, met with Hayden Schlossberg and Josh Heald and John Hurwitz, I said, I want to play this guy vulnerable. I don't want to play him like I did the movies. I want to, have him have some vulnerability, learn why he's such an asshole, why he's so difficult, why he's so tough. And they wrote that in, and, they accommodated me. And now we're doing season 6, and that's all mixed in, and it's all exciting to play. But I like playing vulnerability more than playing tough. I always have. But, you look like me, you don't look like, what's his name, Elvis Costello. So it's, you just get to that space. And what I'm developing now with my son is an older gunfighter with a 12-year-old kid, and they team up to get the bad guys in the Old West. And it's a wonderful story of moral fiber being exchanged, and it's about heroes. And now that audiences are so sophisticated, more so than the days of Karate Kid, they're open to really intelligent filmmaking,
Wow. You talk about, that was great that your character kind of, as I'm a former professional wrestler, it's going back into professional wrestling. I know you were getting your iPad ready and stuff, and maybe heard that in the background in the green room. What's happening is you were the biggest heel in the world, kind of turned a little bit babyface during the movies, then come back into this where you're a good guy in so many ways, and people start to really trust you, and then you turn on all of them again. That's got to be one of the best characters in the world, where you're like, okay, we trust this guy, and bam, you turn heel. That's the biggest, like the Rock right now on WWE, how he turned heel on all the and the fans started to hate him. Isn't it fun doing that turn? You got to love that turn.
Writers see that first. They see the transitions first. Because my birthday was Wednesday, so I had dinner with the writers. They took me out, and we talked about that. We talked about, does the actor realize the transition that he makes? Because we actors, we want more. We want more. I want more in that show. I wanted more in Cagney and Lacey. Do you see the transitions that the writers make for you when they're really astute? These guys are astute. They had perception of the characters a year, 2 years before I came with them. I came with them with notes at the beginning of season 3 saying, this is what I want to do with the character, make transitions. I met with mercenaries. I met with Army Rangers. I met with so many people, and they already knew what I wanted, you know? And it's fun to do the transitions, but you got to really see it. Season 6, a lot of transitions. But sometimes as an actor, you don't see them in great depth as the writers do, you know? And yes, it is exciting to play once you get it. You gotta get it and get over the ego and get over that, you know, you want to be a hero. You want to be cool. You want to do Steve McQueen, you know? And then you realize that you're set up to do what you just said, to make a transition into darkness again. But then the light is even brighter because you came from a darker place than you did 40 years ago, you know?
Wow.
I hope you understand that, because it's really...
No, it makes, as a wrestler, I totally understand it. And I know how to tell those storylines because I literally was down south in a organization almost like Jerry Lawler's, where I was tag teaming with the top babyface, and they always trusted the big giant. But when I turned on him in Poplar Bluff, Missouri on TV, that place went freaking bananas and they wanted to kill me. And it was the best turn possible because they trust you. They love you. Why would you do that? That's what a movie, a television show, professional wrestling, when there's a story, you put your heart into it and that character, and then, man, they turned on me. And it's like a wow factor. And especially in streaming, next episode, there's got to be something else. No, don't say it's the next season. I have to wait. And we're waiting a lot longer for the next season, Greg.
It's really, it's fascinating. You know, I've always had a great respect for writers. And when I was under contract for a couple of movies years ago by a company, I read a lot of scripts, and the respect I had for writers just soared. You know, it's so difficult to discipline yourself and create well, you know, just sort of put yourself in a room and stop life and just work on cue cards and index cards and create characters. It's really tough. And I have especially on the Cobra Kai, you know, the staff writers and all, I just love what they do. I've got stuff coming up that has blown me away, and I can't wait to do it. It's like having a new love affair with acting, you know, and it's all because of the writing.
Wow.
Totally.
Martin, what similarities, if any, do you see between the John Reese character in Cobra Kai and Ambrose Massey in Farhaven?
Well, you know, the ambition of John Kreese is a little different than Ambrose Massey, because Ambrose is doing terrible things to buy up the land for a very commercial reason, so he can become rich and own and be powerful. You know, I don't think any moral fiber. It's interesting. There is moral fiber there because he wants the West he wants the town to be like it was, you know, like, you know, Bruce Boxleitner and I created a backstory where the two of us arrived in that town of Farhaven and created the commercialism. I created, you know, things a little more in the commercial world, and he created things in the rural world, you know, with ranches and horses and cattle. And now I want to own all of it. And, you know, he is very happy in his ranch, but he doesn't want anything to change. And my character, I don't want anything to change. I want to buy everybody's ranch and make it all look like, what is that great ranch with Taylor Sheridan bought it in Texas, the couple of 100,000 acres. And both characters want to go back to the way things were, simpler, but my character wants to do it as a rich man. And Bruce's character wants to do it as just a rancher, with a great deal of integrity. So how you compare it to John Kreese? I don't think John Kreese has a lot of ambition in the sense of wealth. He just wants, it's very personal because he loves Johnny Lawrence, and now he doesn't love Johnny Lawrence until we have some surprises later on, in season. But, there's a great deal of moral fiber and integrity in John Kreese. He just doesn't have the patience to deal with others who don't have that. He just assumed do what you do in the ring and snap and break them, throw them out the window. He just doesn't have that because he's been through it. He's been through it in Vietnam. He understands what it's like to be amoral. He understands what it's like to be in a marshmallow society with kids that are turning into marshmallows. And there's no heroes for kids. There's no goddamn heroes for kids. So, he's into creating a triumphant character like Johnny Lawrence into the hero.
Right.
He tried to be a hero himself, but he failed. He bent the rules too much.
Right.
And now
it goes back to, sorry.
I can't give much information, but it extends him into creating a hero. And I think that's what we need today. It's just what we need.
It goes back to the backstory, Greg, the backstory of the characters in Cobra Kai that we didn't find out in Karate Kid. And they did a heck of a lot better job than the last Matrix. I just watched it finally. No, that backstory was horrid. But this backstory is so good because we finally know why John Kreese was John Kreese in Cobra Kai. If you watch, I don't like giving things away, but your son playing that character really saw, oh my gosh, you weren't that horrible a person. You know what I mean? That people thought you were. It had to do, you went through things in life that caused you to become that kind of guy. Would you say the character in Farhaven also in ways to become this power hungry, powerful person is based on his childhood? Because it looks like childhood or certain times of life that happens, even though they probably didn't tell that backstory.
There's no question about it. I believe that when, if you think about characters like James Dean or Marlon Brando, or any of those people, they had miserable youths. They just did. And when they got to be actors and you put the camera on them or they go on stage, they had so much in here, so much to pour out. I had a different story. I was adopted and I had two loving parents, and they sacrificed a lot for me and gave me everything. But there's a lot of people that had abusive parents. There's a lot of people that had neglectful parents, alcoholic parents, and all that stuff molds you into something that you have to graduate from into normality, into what's acceptable in society. And I hate to say it, but it does help the acting. It does help bringing up those emotions, because I think about, I was my lady friend, Mary Squire. I remember when I was in prison in season 5, how many times, and we were breaking up, how many times I would draw upon that experience of what I was going through in my personal life with trying to break out of jail, trying to get out of jail. How do I do this? How do I make this relationship work? How do I get out of jail? And one fed the other.
Totally.
That's just the way it is. John Kreese was literally a product of Vietnam, of winning everything until he became a soldier in Vietnam. And then he wasn't allowed to win because most of our kids were not allowed to win back in those days. They just weren't allowed to win in that war, and he's a product from that. And that writers built upon that, just like Robert Kamen built upon the Marine sergeant he had. The sensei he had was worse than John Kreese. He told me that himself. He says, my sensei was worse than yours. He was a drill sergeant in the Marines.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So a question for you. I happened to get a look at a clip when you were talking to Bruce Boxleitner in Farhaven, and you were, trying to get him to let you buy his land again, right? And take it from him. And you said a couple of words, and then the two of you just had this almost like what you weren't saying. You were just like kind of staring at each other in a certain way, and the expressions, and even Bruce's wife. It was a very powerful, few moments in that scene with nothing being said. What was going through your mind, or how did you guys, come to that resolve to make that scene
Well,
so perfect?
This backstory I was telling you about, that Bruce and I discussed. Bruce and I, we go to the Hole in the Wall every year where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid used to hide out. And we go on 5 days in Chaps and Dusters on horseback rides. And both of us are really into the West. And, we created this relationship where both of us arrived, and it wasn't written that way. There was no documentation that Massey and Bruce's character arrived and developed that town 25 years ago. But we created that.
Yeah.
And so it's very hard for me to try and lie to him, because he knows me so well, saying that, hey, these Apaches, it's very dangerous out here. You should go into town. I'll buy your ranch. I'll do you a favor. It's very hard to lie to it's like trying to lie to a good friend. They can read you, they know. So all those pauses, it's like the pauses I have with Johnny Lawrence. There's so much history between John Kreese and Johnny Lawrence. There's so much history, imaginary history, between Ambrose and Bruce's character, that's what you read. And many, many times, I think, in movies, the less said, the more you can read, because of the history of the characters, or the history of the plot, or the history just of the last couple of days, makes the work richer. It's like you as an audience member, when we watched Magnum PI or Cagney Lacey, you invited those people as friends into your living room to watch them on the small TV. But when you wanted to see Sean Connery and you wanted to see Peter O'Toole or Jack Nicholson, you had to pay $20 to go and watch them on the big screen. And that was the difference between the mystique of the movie star and, the characters today. But there's a mix today, so you don't have that problem anymore. And so Bruce and I have been around for so long that we want to make things more interesting, and created this history between the characters so that the sequel can be like that,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So Martin, I went ahead and, social media, shared in my Facebook group after I saw a post. It was your birthday and I told my fans in my Facebook group, I was going to sing happy birthday to you. So I'm going to sing happy birthday to you. Then Greg is going to go ahead and ask his final question. And then I said something else to my social media group as well, or on one podcast, because I do a lot of shows and I'm always doing stuff. All right. I am one of the worst singers in the world. Ready, guys? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Martin. I won't call you Marty. Happy birthday to you.
Good
Thank
job.
you very much. Thank you very much. The IMDb and all those Wikipedia, they all have me older than I am. And you send them passports, you send them licenses, they still don't change anything. But it doesn't even matter anymore, As long as you stay in good shape, you got good family relationships, you're getting a little older, as long as you stay healthy. I think that a lot of the Cobra Kai's success has allowed one to really, I must have gotten 50 texts from birthday wishes yesterday. Some of them don't say who they are. They just put a phone number they expect you to remember. And I wish I did remember who they were, because so many things there were so many wonderful, well-wishers and moments that they talk about, but I don't remember, So it was a great day. It was a really good day. And thank you very much for that rendition. That was
You're welcome.
fantastic.
It was a dream because I'm a big, as a wrestling guy, we call marks. I'm a big mark for Cobra Kai and Karate Kids. So to get the chance to talk to you today has been amazing. Greg, go ahead with your celebrity question. And this is a deep question, Martin. So get ready.
All right.
Well, first of all, Martin, let me say what an honor and privilege this has been, for me. I enjoyed you in all the movies and everything that you've done, and I love watching Cobra Kai and so on. So I really appreciate the time that we've had and that you've
Thank you.
set aside for us. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
And I asked Jesse the same question. I had the privilege of being able to interview him last year on Celebrity Interviews Live from the Grotto as well. And I asked him the same question. So I can't wait to hear your response. So tell me, Martin, what's the most important thing in life you feel you've ever learned?
Is a dual answer to that. I think that from a professional standpoint, good work is a key for me now, today. I could never violate a moment in a script and fake it. I just rather not do the project. And family. I don't think on your deathbed or in the hospital, your last director or producer are going to show up. Who's going to show up is family. The value of family is what I've learned. And, it's really interesting that people throw around this word icon and legend and all this. And I don't think of myself as an icon or a legend. To me, the icons and legends, Jack Nicholson, Sean Connery, Anthony Hopkins, Peter O'Toole, those are icons, Marlon Brando. Yet, to this generation, Billy Zabka said to me one day, I said, why do people think we're icons? They throw these words around. And he said, because this generation thinks of us as that. They didn't have John Wayne or Clint or John Garfield or Spencer Tracy or any of those people, or Humphrey Bogart. They didn't have that. So it finally made sense to me, And yet, I think I've gone the opposite direction. I've gone into humility with this kind of success, rather than being, a putz, difficult, eccentric, And so I think I've learned, to answer your question with a long-winded answer, I think I've learned a lot about integrity as a massive, important value to me, and I'm still learning about humility. Still learning that.
Wonderful.
All right. So speaking of humility, another thing I called, if I'm going to be talking to John Kreese right now, and I see you could beat up, Johnny Lawrence and Ralph Macchio. Guess what? You know what? You're not going to beat up me, former professional wrestler coming back into the ring. I'm going to challenge John Kreese / Martin Kove to a pro wrestling match at a later time during my documentary to get in the ring with me. Just going to challenge you right now to this. See if you're scared, chicken.
So I'll get in the ring with you. I got in the ring with Larry Holmes for 3 rounds. So, but it was 1990 at a celebrity boxing event. So I'm not in that good a shape anymore. But I'm glad to get in the ring. I don't know if I'll fight you in the ring, but I'll get in the ring with you. a couple of moves, and yeah, I'll do it in your documentary, sure.
Well, that's great. A lot of great stuff. Appreciate it, Martin. Thanks again.